I know that I put the key for the padlock on the blue trunk into my bag, but now I just can't find it. Oh shoot. I changed my mind at the last minute and took a different bag.
Oh, honey, I cannot find the loop paper. You remember I asked you to get it out of the bedroom cupboard when we were loading.
Oh wow, I am so sorry, but the phone rang when I was passing through the kitchen and I am afraid it stayed behind.
I just don't believe it. I kept telling you to make a checklist. Now the loop paper is in your kitchen, 500 miles away. Good thing I brought the Sunday paper.
I cannot bear the thought of it. Do you really expect me to use newspaper?
From the beginning I thought this idea of going off in the wilds was a crazy idea. Now you have left behind the loop paper, not to mention what else you may have left behind. John kept telling you to make a list and you kept insisting that you have done this many times and do not need a list. You know exactly what is needed. I just want to go home.
I promise that if we ever do this again, I will make sure that I buy a journal exclusively for the trip and that I will write out a checklist for everything we need to take with us.
That is a great idea. I listened to a guy called Hoggy on the internet and he was saying how important it is to have a journal. He also stressed how important it is to have regular meetings so that we can all help in the compiling of these lists and in assisting with the planning. I think we must get more involved and not leave everything to the men. What on earth would we do if something happened to them and we would need to manage to get home without them? One never knows what can happen.
Guys, I'm truly sorry. This has happened and I should have listened to your suggestions. Having done this so many times, I really thought I had things under control. Sadly, what has happened cannot be undone. So please, can we all just try and make the most of the situation we find ourselves in? Otherwise, the entire trip will be spoiled. I promise that the next time I will listen to you guys. I realize now the importance of everyone sharing the burden of planning and preparation.
Let us begin by dividing the checklist into important categories. Probably the most critical and important consideration, because when Murphy strikes, this is your most powerful tool on your adventure. This has too often caught out people who are so used to being in touch on devices 24/7 that they have no real appreciation of how important this is when things go wrong. They generally discover this at the worst possible moment and can cost you your life. Arguably equally important to communication. If you cannot navigate and cannot determine your location at any given moment in time, then essentially you are lost, with no idea in which direction you should be moving, always assuming that you are still mobile. As I'm sure you can imagine, this is a critical and essential commodity, for without it, you're simply not going anywhere. We must also realize that we generally do not know what our fuel consumption is likely to be in challenging conditions. And although we can get an idea by reference to others that have gone before, conditions can vary dramatically depending on weather and other factors that could impact your particular adventure. It is also important to review your fuel situation on a regular basis. If your fuel situation is no longer adequate to complete your adventure as planned, then retrace your steps before critical becomes a question of survival. Or move in the direction of the closest known confirmed fuel supply. Essentially, the more fuel you are able to carry, the greater your safety margin. In more cases than not, the sheer weight of the fuel becomes the limiting factor on the length or distance of your adventure. There is a rule in aviation which wise pilots follow. Identify your destination and 2 alternatives. Never fly in the lower half of your fuel tank. If for any reason one of the 2 alternatives is no longer reachable, then choose the best remaining option and get on the ground as soon as possible to review and refuel. When going to remote and desolate destinations, it is important to fully comprehend the fact that you are now totally on your own. You cannot summon assistance, as is the case back home, so ensure that you carry a full range of tools appropriate for your specific vehicle. If in doubt, consult your local dealership for your specific vehicle and obtain from them a list of which tools and emergency spare parts you should take with you. Also realize that it is of little benefit to have the parts and the tools with you unless you actually know how to use them. So take courses and acquaint yourself before departure on your adventure. Acquaint yourself of the risks you will face at your destination and ensure that you are well prepared to protect yourself if needed. Know what snakes and other insects or creatures are found at your destination and equip yourself with the correct antivenom/medication for whatever you might encounter. Again, know how to use or apply such treatment. The items listed on this page are of a more personal preference nature, and with the exception of medical, do not particularly need specific mention here. When it comes to medical, it is important that each member of your party must themselves ensure that they take adequate supplies of their medication, not only for the estimated duration of the adventure, but probably again wise to carry sufficient supply for a period longer than the estimate. This obviously will depend on the individual's needs and dependence on such medication. If you happen to be the organizer of this adventure, you would be well advised to acquaint yourself with the medical needs for other members of your group. In cases where they suffer from a condition which could be life-threatening, I suggest you request they give you a written clearance from their doctor as to the condition of their health, relating to risk associated with participating in your adventure. Don't forget that their families and loved ones will look to you for an explanation why you exposed their loved one to such risks. The issue of food and beverages is an extensive area of research and will ultimately be dealt with in a separate webinar at some future date. It is important that at all times we are in communication with other members in our group, especially at times where we move away from the group for personal visits to the bathroom. Two-way radios or walkie-talkies can be useful for this purpose, always bearing in mind their limited range. As already mentioned elsewhere in the webinar, such adventures should be undertaken with 2 or more vehicles for the sake of survival and safety. And although not that common anymore, it would be advisable to install a CB in each of the vehicles. Not only do they have a greater range than a walkie-talkie, but if you are able to rig up some sort of antenna at the highest point in your area, they have been reported to have considerable range in certain given circumstances. Communication is one of the most critical elements of your adventure. It is your lifeline to the outside world when you face situations which require drastic and immediate attention beyond your capabilities. Know the flight routes and times that cross over the area in which you are situated. Know the international emergency frequencies and put out a mayday call at the appropriate times. Passing aircraft do monitor these emergency frequencies and can assist in serious or life-threatening situations. Please, however, ensure that you know your coordinates of your location before making the mayday call. Read up and know the procedure for making such a call before you leave home. Navigation. A GPS is able to give position information anywhere on the surface of the world, and with good visibility of the sky, accurate to within 15 feet of your actual location. All the waypoints identified during your planning and research phase of your adventure should already be captured on the GPS for fast and quick reference. Even in the event that the area of your adventure does not have road information, you are able to steer a course from one point to another, thereby enabling you to move through your track, albeit not always in a straight line. It will always provide you with the heading and the distance to your next desired waypoint. Provided your cell phone has GPS capability enabled, you can download maps from the internet for your device and use it to navigate, despite the fact that you are not connected to a cell phone tower. Although this may be the easiest way because you are familiar with your device, never rely solely on this means of navigation, as it does not allow for the capture of numerous waypoints, and generally the screen is small and therefore not ideal. When it comes to visiting these remote destinations, it is always important to have a Plan B solution option. And with the importance attached to navigation, it is vital to have a printed version for reference purposes. Although one might assume that the 1 in 50,000 map would have more detail than the 1 in 100,000, it does occasionally happen that a particular 1 in 100,000 shows a detail not shown on the 1 in 50,000 map. Always rather have too much information at your disposal. Having access to a topographical map can be useful in mountainous terrain. Topographical maps are also available to download on your devices in some, if not all, mountainous regions. Fuel and oil. I have already addressed this important issues earlier in this webinar. There are several options available in which one can carry additional fuel supplies. Both a long-range fuel tank and jerry cans are probably the safest bet when specifically designed for this purpose. Tools and maintenance. I do believe that the list speaks for themselves, but I'm sure you might begin to comprehend this need for these checklists. For if you did not have them, any item left behind could result in serious consequences. Safety and security. Once you have completed your initial planning and preparation, you should have determined whether there are any dangerous animals in the area you plan to visit. If it is found that there are wild animals that pose a potential threat, then you would be well advised in erecting such a fence, which proved extremely effective while on a visit in the Chobe National Park. Again, the remaining items on this checklist speak for themselves and have an application in certain areas and circumstances, which you can only determine once you have completed your planning and preparation for your adventure.